There we go.
Nice job.
Okay.
Keep her around.
Thanks.
So ready to start? Sure. Okay, welcome everyone. But we're not going out over the air.
Correct. I will be able to upload this to YouTube later, but I'll come out and let you know when I can go live. It's still trying to come off, right?
So we'll have this recorded, and then it'll just catch live in process. And then once
when it
this
gets
is recorded,
rebroadcast, will it be the whole thing?
with this recorded, he can turn around and pull this and rebroadcast it.
Okay. So the rebroadcast will have the time.
Yes.
I certainly know how to send it to YouTube. I'll have to figure out how to put it back on the cable system if you want to broadcast it that way. I'm sure I can figure out how to get it to the cable system, but it's not something I've done yet.
Yeah, because if we have some, it'd be good if we could.
Yeah, so just speak up, so
Okay.
it pick you up.
So at this point,
Speak into the squirrel.
Squirrel. At this point, I'd like to open up tonight's meeting. Thanks all for waiting. You will all join me for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we go into public participation, Joel?
Yeah, Mr. King, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, and I'm probably going to need some help from members of the board to chime in, but we recently had the passing of several key community members here in town that we'd like to acknowledge the passing of. One would be Mary Gladding. Mary, who's a substitute here in the district for a number of years, longtime volunteer, obviously a member of local churches and helped put on meals, and just was a wonderful woman who worked very hard to make the community a better place. So our thoughts to her children, her husband Rick. Also recently, Clark Hackett, who was a former road agent, I believe. I know he was a long-time volunteer at the 500 Club umpiring when all you got was a cold hamburger after the game. I'll other people please chime in if you can think of other things. And most recently, Dottie Bean. What can you say about Dottie? She did a little bit of everything in town. Some people recently in conversations referred to me as the matriarch, one of the matriarchs of Farmington. But I'll allow other board members to chime in as well. These are three huge losses to our community, all of which gave in different ways, but very quality things.
I mean, I knew Matt and Mary a little bit through different things that we came across together. They always seemed to be very community-oriented, trying to help out. I mean, and with Dottie and Clark, I know they would always used to pull me aside when I was, whatever I was involved with, give me a little bit of piece of their mind, let me know what they thought. And I always appreciated that because they didn't mix any words and ask questions, and also put forth their opinion as being a senior community member for what they thought. And I always appreciated that.
I have a hard time even talking about Dottie. When they opened Blessed Bargains, they were doing it on a shoestring, and they had no idea what to do. So I stop by from time to time and offer a little guidance as to, why don't you try this, why don't you do that. One of the things I did was they were all scattered, so I bought aprons for them and had Blessed Bargains engraved and embroidered on it. And 20 years later, they had a ceremony at the church, and they held those up. Said, this is where we started. But that's Dottie. Dottie you could talk to her 5 minutes ago or 20 years ago, and she's still. As far as Clark goes, one of Clark's greatest loves in life was music. And when Friends of Farmington opened the doors for, we'd like to have somebody come in and do like a jam session, I was like, that's me. He opened early, he would set up all of the equipment and just invite people from everywhere. But the biggest thing about that was you never saw Clark Hackett smile unless he had a guitar in his hand. And that was Clarky.
Thank you.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Mr. Loss of Mary Gladding, Dottie Reed, and Clark. Thank you. Moving on next to public participation. We do have a resident that called in earlier that we're going to try to communicate with here shortly. But do we have anybody here that has any public input? Let's see if I can get the resident on the line. Hello, this is Kelly.
Yes,
Kelly, this is Charlie King from the Farmington School Board. We have you on speakerphone. You wanted to speak with us?
yes, I have two daughters that go to the middle school in Littleton, and neither one of them are vaccinated right now. One of them can get vaccinated by the end of this week, because she turns 12. However, even if she were to go to the school, she can still potentially bring the virus home to my other children and my grandson. And I'm high risk. Even though I'm vaccinated, I can still get the virus and get sick. My question is I know they're not offering remote, which I don't understand why. My kids actually did really well with the remote. I just think this new Delta variant, I really don't think it's seeing all the schools down south and what they're going through with the kids starting back to school. I'm very, very scared for my children to go to school with this virus that's potentially very deadly to them. And I'm not sure what to do. I don't want to bring my children to school, and they both have IEPs, and that's another concern of mine, is what am I supposed to do for my children when they both have learning disabilities and need the extra help. And I know I spoke to somebody, I think it was principal or vice principal at the middle school earlier, and she said that there's a relapse program, which one of my kids did that before, and she struggled with it. I'm not sure what to do as a parent. I know I'm just scared for my children to go in public school at this time. I don't know what you guys have to offer. I know if they get their VLAX, I don't even have any means of even getting them a computer. You guys have offered that before, when they did like the remote learning. I don't have a means to any computer. Is there something that could be addressed with getting them help that way and making sure that their IEPs would be taken care of?
Hold on a second. Ruth Ellen, do you have anything to add or address?
VLAX will do some accommodation for an IEP, but at this point, there's not a dual enrollment that's being allowed through the state like there was last year, so they can't be our student and attending VLAX. If they're taking 1 or 2 supplemental classes, that's one thing, but if their entire program is online, VLAX is getting the charter school money and we don't. And so they're not considered our student, which would mean it's either withdraw to go to VLAX, withdraw to go to homeschool, or be with us right now.
Did you hear all that, Kelly?
Sort of. Hard to hear. She's but she's distant. But, so, they would have to go full-time and just not enroll in Farmington? if that's what I heard correctly.
Hold on a second, Lieutenant's gonna come closer to the phone.
Okay, thank you.
Working my way through the chaos.
Point of order, if I may, Mr. King. Would it be appropriate for Kelly to have this conversation with Superintendent Vaughn in more of a private setting? If she hasn't...
I called the thing is I called the Board of Education in Concord because they said it was all each town or county, wherever SAU, you guys make the decision. So they told me to take it up with you guys of what to do. And these options that my children are getting, they're not good. This is not helping my situation. I don't want to have to take my children out of the school when you guys have the means like you did last year. I just don't understand why that can't be an option this year, especially for the children that did succeed with the remote learn. My kids did very well with it. They were very attentive. They went to school every day. They did very well. I just don't personally get why I would have to withdraw them from the farming school and mess up their whole school and not know what they're going to get into with the VLAT, which I had one kid already do VLAT before she did not succeed, and she didn't have an IQ, and she struggled. I'm just very, very concerned of what's going to happen with my children's education. And then that's why I called the Department of Education, and they said that it is a private matter that you guys deal with, like each individual town deals with, and making the decisions. That's why I'm taking it up with the school board and not just with Ellen.
Okay. Tim?
Kelly, this is Tim Brown, I'm a school board member. If you don't mind, just a couple questions. Can you explain to me what your fear is with your child coming back into the school district?
The fear is to get the virus and die. That's my fear. But she has asthma. My daughter has very bad asthma. And that's why I didn't want her to go to school at all last year. Because if she gets sick.
Okay. That individual, the individual medical need will be a conversation between you and the superintendent. Those are private issues, but I just kind of wanted to get a handle on, was your concern the plan of action that this board was taking in reopening? So if I get your concern correctly, it's the lack of remote services that are available right now.
I don't feel you guys should reopen with how things are, but that's your guys'
Your decision is for your individual daughter that would probably be better addressed with the superintendent, and then if you're not happy with those results, bring it back to us for
I don't want to
non-public.
have to wait for my daughter's education, the way the school's supposed to be starting soon.
Yep.
I didn't know you guys weren't offering remote. I had no idea. I didn't get a letter. I just called because I was at school starting. I need to make sure, like, if there, I didn't get a call saying to go get the computers again. And I'm like, is it still open in the school? Then I was like, oh my God.
Okay.
So I just, that's my concern. Like, I don't know what to do as a
Okay,
parent.
Kelly, this is Ruth Ellen. You have my cell number. Let's talk tomorrow.
I don't have that anymore.
Okay, all right. I have your number. I will call you in the morning. It will probably be after 9 o'clock. And we
I
will,
have an appointment at 8:30.
Okay.
At around 9:30 should be okay.
okay, I will do my best to get back to you then.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Anyone else for public comment? Not hearing any. Moving to new business. The job description for special education coordinator.
So you'd ask me to bring forward the job description that includes this as an administrative position,
Yes.
and this is what you have.
So does anyone have any questions regarding that job description?
The only question I have is, has this been advertised yet? Or is it to
We
be
have
advertised?
advertised the position as anticipated, because you had told me to go ahead and put it out, and then we will amend this once we have that to put out.
Is there
So,
any-
and at this point, I don't have a particularly long puddle to choose from.
Thank guess my second question is, has there been any conversation with the union on our anticipation of making an administrator versus a position that's not listed in a contract and was not legally ratified by PELRB when we made the switch last time?
There's been a kind of a quick reference as we've been dealing with other issues with the union. It hasn't been a long conversation, and I will certainly make it thus. I don't anticipate any issues with it.
I'll make the motion to approve the job description as written. However, I would like to have a conversation with the union president.
Second.
Or the next president. Are they elected a new president or just?
Well, there's one in place
Okay.
currently, so I'll talk to that one and then we'll see where it goes.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Moving
I
along.
have one other new business.
Go ahead.
Can you speak up to Mike? I can barely hear you.
I'll try.
Thank you.
I got a call at home today on a child in need of services with some backpacks and school supplies.
We have backpacks that are being donated to Henry Wilson, and I will have more information on that at the end of the week. I also got a call from the DOE. We have backpacks that are being donated through a DOE drive as well. So we will have supplies that are available at open houses for,
Parents to grab.
yes.
Okay.
And if there's anything specific they need, they can call us and we'll make sure we get that to them.
Okay.
So who will be the contact person?
Me,
Okay.
at this point.
Would it be possible at the open house to get my hands on one that I can deliver to this family?
Absolutely, yep.
Just to make sure that the child's all set.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
We found you had one business?
I do.
Donation?
We have a donation that was made, very generous donation from New England Furniture. They have donated chairs for our teacher's lounge at Henry Wilson. And that donation is in the amount of $800. And they were sorely needed and they are greatly appreciated.
Sorely.
No, yes, no pun intended, but yeah, kind of did.
We already asked if we could test drive them here, and the answer was no.
They're not padded, they're not padded, but they're nice chairs.
Of course they are.
Certainly.
Absolutely appreciated, needed to bring it to the board as I can accept 500 and over 500 is yours to accept.
So I'd like to make a motion to accept the donation of the chairs with value of $800 from Newman Furniture. By Stacy, any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor? Going to old business. We have open house reminders.
Yes, our open houses will be from 5 to 7. Valley View is on the night of the 30th. Henry Wilson is the night of the 31st. And Farmington High School will be the night of the 16th of September. I did put that on there as a reminder because last week we had talked about drawing straws of who was attending which. So I'm bringing it back so that we can solidify those straws for the results thereof.
So the 30th is next Thursday?
No, the 30th is Monday.
You're in the wrong one.
Get in the right
We're
one.
not meeting on Monday?
That was kind of the general idea, but
I don't mind being at Valley View. I'm also available for next night too.
I can do the high school. It's gotta be there anyway. You can be there anyway, right? No, no. Oh, that's right. I'm thinking.
If I'm not mistaken, the following week is Labor Day, a holiday.
correct.
So we probably don't want to skip next Monday's meeting. Can we do the same and start at 7? And then whatever board members that can make it, we'll post it as we're going to be there.
Remember, you have the other section of mainstays, which we haven't nailed down either. So that may be next week as well.
Let's start with the, go ahead.
Would it be possible to post all three of those as a board meeting, and those of us that can make it just go? Or do you want to specify
Either way, I would like at least to make sure that the ones who have students in a particular building have first dibs on that building if they wish to do. We could post it that way. I don't know that it's required, but I can. But you had talked about wanting to specify who was going where, so it's back here and you may use your please.
I think on the IT infrastructure and the governance plan, I'd like to see that moved to the weekend of Labor Day.
Okay, so the 13th.
Yep, and keep an emergency, must-act agenda for Monday night, yes, for Monday and Labor Day. Just open it up to board members on what buildings are going to attend. I plan on being at all three. I can be on all three by myself, I can be all three with other board members, or I can be all three with the full board. But I think we need to get out there in our buildings and get a pulse of the public on are we moving in the right direction and is there any concerns?
So we have the 30th, 31st, and the 16th?
Yes.
What about, sorry.
I was gonna say, I can definitely do the high school. I'm doing the college moving thing on the 31st, so I'll kind of tied up on those days, so.
What if we have our regular September 1st Monday meeting on Tuesday? So that we're meeting.
I like that idea too. Maybe not meet Monday and meet Tuesday after Labor Day? So,
The 7th?
I'm not trusting that calendar, sorry.
Hold on, you mean the 31st? Pick a date.
You can ask them. I mean, we could do like a placeholder on the 31st, and then,
Well, isn't
30th
everyone
and-
30th and 31st?
and then move the meeting to the 7th.
Do we have recording on the 7th?
Is there a
Is that the 7th of Monday or Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
We have planning, don't we?
Right.
That means that I lose my videographer
And a chair.
and the chair. One perhaps more crucial than the other. We'll just leave that there. I didn't say which one.
we can do it on the 8th.
Oh, I won't have Brian on the 7th either.
We can do it on the 8th, the Wednesday.
So what was wrong with the 13th?
I think just that we
Kinda
didn't
far out.
want to wait out that two full
3 weeks
weeks.
out.
You got a 2-week span.
3, really, but.
Three.
Yeah.
No, because if we meet the 30th, after 2nd,
Oh.
which is next Monday, and then...
It would be 2 weeks, which is normal for a lot of places.
Right, it'd be 2 full weeks. So I think that give us an abbreviated meeting, starting at 7 next Monday, and meet the 13th.
All right. Then I'd like to volunteer for the one that doesn't fall on the board meeting.
Okay,
The
so on
30th or the
so
16th?
So it'd be the
If you
31st.
have a 30th meeting, I would like to volunteer for the 31st to be.
The 31st is Henry Wilson.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So Joel wants to do Henry Wilson.
I will do value.
Okay, that's on the 30th.
No, I will try to do the 30th and the 31st, because that means it's going to be starting after the open house closes at 7. Right?
Yes, and you may or may not wish to be there the full 2 hours.
So you may need to post them then, because if Tim's going to go for all.
Right, we should just post it.
That's what I said, let's just post it.
The 16th, don't know, probably available. The 30th and 31st. Tim, your thoughts?
Tentatively, I'm going to be at all three, so that if something falls through the cracks, and something.
Okay. So, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Schedule our next meeting, actually, the next 2 meetings.
Yeah.
And the very next one is August 30th, at 7.
And what did we decide for the following?
Maybe the
7th?
13th.
Oh, we're gonna, okay.
Because that's only 2 meetings.
We're gonna walk on the wild side.
We're gonna call an emergency meeting on the 8th.
I'm gonna need a t-shirt like that.
Must have been a gift.
Somebody that knows it well.
Moving next to COVID level and notifications. have a draft proposal. And
So going back to, I looked at the levels, because we're looking really more at Farmington's numbers than trying to just go with county. The county is listed with the 4 levels. Farmington's numbers haven't matched up with county numbers particularly well in the past. That could happen, but I'm not going to alter my grading pattern. Tim had mentioned just going green, yellow, red, which is fairly obvious to most people. If you throw in another color, it starts to get a little tougher. So going back to that, I looked at the indicators that many of the other area schools are using, because we have staff that are coming from other districts as well. And certainly this is open for discussion, but if you look at the page that just has, and I don't have a color copy, but the DHHS indicators and the thresholds for community transmission. Looking at fewer than 50 cases in 100,000 per population. I used 7,000 for the population, just as round numbers. That would put us at 1 to 4 for 50. It would put us at 5 to 7 cases for 50 to 99. And it would put us at more than 8 cases for high. I'm guessing those numbers are going to be lower than you're going to want to use for thresholds. At the end of last week, we were at 12.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
putting it out there is your
That number, so when
basic.
looking, so what that number you're putting here, just to clarify.
So if you look
New
at the,
cases in less than 14 days per 100,000. Where does this 50 to 99 come from? The CDC?
so these are the levels that several area districts are using as their threshold.
So-
It doesn't mean that's where you have to go. I'm throwing out what others have landed in.
So 99 or 100 in the yellow, so I'm going to start. 100 per 100,000 is 0.1%. That's what that equates to, not a percent, 0.1%.
So, which is where the 7 comes from if you're looking at 7,000.
7 is 0.1%.
I understand that,
Right.
yes. So, again, giving you where the numbers were.
And I think the highest number we saw last year was, anybody got it?
57.
Yeah, it was in the 50s.
Which was right after vacation week, correct, or some type of holiday break?
It was just before Christmas. It was, yeah.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
So I guess my question, looking at these numbers, I agree with them all. But do these numbers make sense for our district? Our in-house building cases in the district?
Because this is the cases in Farmington, not cases
This
in
is the
school.
cases in
Yeah.
Farmington.
But-
No, looking at,
But if we take those numbers,
Yeah.
transpose them down to, for instance, the high school, we have 1 to 4 cases in the high school, that might be a green area, depending on what the exposure is, and, you know, it's gonna have to be an intelligent analysis of what's in that building. If we get multiple exposures with these 1 to 4, well, we may wanna elevate and jump a different step, but looking at the 1 to 4, 5 to 7, and then the above, do we adopt those green, yellow, red numbers now in a building level?
So you're saying cases per,
so 8 per building?
see, I do like the thought of having 2 numbers, one for cases affected students or staff, and then the community number.
Okay.
Because the community number could be high, but we could have 5 cases in the high school, 7 cases in the high school. And if we put say if we use a 0.5% before we go to red, which is mandatory, say shields and masks in the community, but what would be the threshold when we would feel that we would need to do that for school, affected school personnel or students? And that may be a much smaller number that's tighter. Because just like when you say the county or the state, we could have some exposures for students and staff that are out that, and still not make that threshold we set. If we would have set 0.5%, which would be 35 cases before we go to red, we may say in the school, this is a certain amount, no more, total per building before, because you may have a building that goes, it indicates that you should be in the red zone, for just that building alone, even though you don't have any cases from the other school or community.
Right.
So,
And for the other measures, masks are relatively easy. You're going to put them on, you're going to take them off. Desk shields take a little bit more time to set up, doable, because it's not just it's making sure the feet are also adhered to the desk to keep it from crashing over. But then the next piece is if you're going to include distancing, that's completely rearranging classrooms. And so I want to be clear too on what we're looking at for mitigation strategies that red automatically puts us to, and are there degrees of redness? I guess that's probably better. Because if we're at the bottom level, it may be masks are mandatory, but we may not be necessarily going to clearing out classrooms and creating distance. If we're doing that, we're going to have a lot of restructuring to do. We are still looking at trying to maintain seating charts, at least so we know where students are in the event that we have to do contact tracing. We're not doing super tight cohorts, but we are going to at least need to know where movement of students are so that we have that if we have to go back to.
Was today the initial day that some of our teachers were back?
I had new staff back today and their mentors, so I had probably 40 people in district.
I guess one of the things in the back of my mind is what type of staff input can we get on us making a decision? They're the ones with the boots on the ground in the classroom. What are they looking at from us? I guess my second concern with Barry is that I just want to put it out there is, and I wish we could put a finger on why we were so effective last year, but the feedback I got on the barriers from a student was the only thing they're protecting in reality is a sneeze that's going forward, because the sides, the way they sit, they're back here anyway. So we're teaching them to sneeze in their arms, so they're sitting at the desk, they're outside the scope of the sides on that, they're turning to their elbow and they're sneezing, which whatever is escaping is going across the aisle. So even though I want to protect our children, our barriers, and we have limited information to make decisions on in one, are they really an effective tool?
It's a good question. I've read some studies that, because they do interfere with the airflow in the room as well, and so both in a positive and a negative, because as you're trying to pull things up and away from, they're also keeping air perhaps in a place where you didn't want it. I mean, it's kind of, it can help, but it might not. Fans are another issue. We're going to be coming back and it's hot. If the fan is pushing the air out of the room, that's one thing. If it's blowing in and blowing across these 4 students, that's a problem, because it's moving that air potentially where it wouldn't have been. So, again, looking to see just how stringent we're looking to be. I don't necessarily want to say you can't have a fan in your room. Right now, I have no problem saying it's drawing the hot air out, but as far as pulling it in and blowing across kids, one of the things that we looked at with DHHS guidance was last year, as we had students who were sitting where blowers were going across, if I had a kid right next to the blower who was positive, our bubble was a little bigger. So,
Have we actually seen DHHS changes in their quarantines and what it's going to look like in our buildings yet?
What we have right now for guidance, and it changed several times last year, so it could still, but our guidance is that students would be sent to quarantine if there is a first person contact in the household only. So they are not sending students to quarantine if the kid next to them is positive, he's out, but everybody else is still in unless this one becomes positive and then he's out. But they're not looking to send out a pod, just the ones who are testing positive.
So getting back to some of this, looking at these numbers. So, I mean, the big transition here is from moderate or yellow to red. Just, so the highest infection rate we saw last year was 57.
Roughly.
And that may say that certainly, I would agree, that should fall within that. I don't know how long that lasted, but that's reasonable, I think, to put that number. So if you were to use 0.5%, that would be 35 people.
For community transmission?
Yes, and whether or not that's a good number, I don't know what percentage of the time that we were at 35 or more in the community. But I think we also have to have a caveat for in school, per building and total, just so that, because we, like I said, if we put the number at 35, or you put it at 42. So you could say 50, just for conversation. But if we have a certain amount of exposure or positive cases in students per building, what would be that number? Would you say 5? You know? Between everybody that works in that building?
There were times last year where we had multiple positives across districts who were not necessarily related to one another.
But was it at the point, how many times was it more than 5 in a building? I don't believe it was.
There were a few times we hit more than 5 in a building positive. We had multiple who were sent to quarantine for first person contact. But that's different. As far as positives within the buildings, I would say Valley View was probably our hardest hit until we got into sports seasons for indoor sports.
So, if I might ask, and I know the Delta virus is different, but in those quarantines that we saw in the buildings, what percentage of those quarantines for near person exposure turned into positive cases? Was it very little? Was it medium? Was it high?
I would say the ones that I knew about were probably a third that ended up testing positive. So I guess some would say, well, that's not high at all, and others say, well, that's pretty high. The incidence of that went down unless there was other exposure beyond the classroom. But, so if you've got kids who may be sitting next to each other, they get, this one's positive, this one gets sent out as well. But if they've also had contact in basketball, and there was a sleepover, and, then, can you say that it's the fact that they were together in class, or the fact that they had all those other exposures as well? Coincidentally, they were sitting here, but. And so those are the things that changed.
Speaking of Valley View, I think we may have to review or use a slightly different standard at Valley View because there are no vaccines at the Valley View level. So do we react sooner rather than later, but by our numbers system. Our other buildings have more, I don't know the whole word, vaccinatable students that are.
Well, and to speak to that, one thing I did put out this afternoon, Tim, I don't know if you've seen it, I did put out to families, because I got the go-ahead from the DOE, I requested, okay, so can I ask who's vaccinated, who's not? DOE's attorneys come back and said, yes, you can under 2 conditions. 1, it has to be a completely optional response, and 2, it must be given anonymously. I can't ask for, what's your email address in responding. So I've sent it out, I've gotten several responses, but what I have right now is just, are you a staff member or a student? Which building do you spend the majority of your time in? Are you fully vaccinated? If the answer is no, are you partially vaccinated? And so I will have those numbers within the first 20 minutes after I'd sent it. I had 100 responses back. So I'm getting, they may have all been staff who just left my building, I don't know, but I'm getting responses back. I will get that data aggregated that I have so far and get that to the board. I will take a look now and see what I've got, but
How did they go out?
it went out, school messenger, and it went out,
I got an
email, and it also went out Facebook and on the school website. I am going to send out, phone to say, here's how you can also give information, but that will come tomorrow because I ran out of data.
At 3:04 today.
Follow-up question, or initial question to that is, when we look at community numbers and we're basing our protocol on a specific number, you need to keep in mind that if the student's at UNH and they test positive and their address is 18 Central Street, Farmington, those types of things can skew your numbers in a positive or a negative direction. So it's important. I mean, I don't know how we could tell those numbers out, but for example, my brother who was in the Air Force used 18 Central Street for his permanent address 12 years after the building was torn down. So to have a student in another state, I mean, they could be in California, but they're using Farmington, New Hampshire for their positive test results. So I don't know how you deal with that.
I'm not sure either. I have 308 responses right now. So for a quick survey here, that's not bad.
Good response, and I guess in my vision, where does the age 12 start approximately in our building?
Grade 6-ish.
So from 6 to
6 back to
12,
pre-K, yeah.
you have a potential for vaccinations.
Potential. I will tell you that as I'm scrolling through the yeses and the nos, I'll sort it quickly. I don't think I have a 50-50 split yet.
But we're not going to get, or we're going to get that 50-50 split or that higher percentage of unvaccinated students because K through 6 is ineligible for
We can break it
vaccination.
out by school.
Well, I can break it
Break
out
out
by
by
school.
building.
I've just put in which building best describes where you spend the majority of your day. Because I also didn't want to, SAU folks, I don't have many, and I didn't want to point them out. Resorting, my nose goes through, actually this is pretty close. Actually, it's right down the middle. My no's are at 154, I have 308. So exactly 50-50 right now. For no's versus yes vaccinated, yes fully vaccinated.
But the 108 no's, the difference could all be in our lower grades. Because they're ineligible.
I can sort those, they are not. Mostly Henry Wilson and Valley View, but I've got high schools and upper Henry Wilson's as well. Mostly students responding at this point.
I guess what I'm looking for is the first thing to alert our attention is is our community members. And that's one factor, saying, hey, we're gonna do it. Second is, I think we need a triggering number within each of our buildings that's gonna make us react. And to find those two, we're good to go, because we may have low numbers in our community, and all of a sudden get hit with a breakout in our buildings.
So we need to do something.
So we need to move.
I mean, just thinking to the numbers, I mean, if you put in the community, if you put the number at 40, being top of the yellow and starting the red.
I guess my
And
other,
then, so between the green, you prorate that down to 20. So based upon the current level of affected people in the community, we'd still be in the green. We have 11, which was what it was today at the state website. We get to 20, we would go to yellow. If it was past 40, we would be in red. But then we need to determine a value for each of those schools. On top of that, I think.
including us in the, we've got 4 buildings, so let's
Could you roll that
define.
into Henry Wilson?
They're pretty separate,
They really are.
yeah, they're pretty locked down.
No, but we do
No,
have to go there to use the restroom.
Yeah. Or the other thing is small quarters, great ventilation, we have to shut down the SAU to prevent that from going into the buildings. So I think we look at it as 4 buildings.
What I didn't want to do was ask vaccinations because there are so few of us. It
That's
makes
fine.
it-
I
yeah.
mean,
Well, you said it was voluntary.
It is voluntary. I can't publish numbers under around 11 or so, which are, that's the level at which it becomes identifiable by
I
the
just call
state.
it adjacent facility. Nobody needs to know, you know what that.
I only have one adjacent facility that's that small.
Right.
I just, you know.
so I guess my other vision is, and again, just to give us an idea, we're sweating over identifying these numbers, and we can have every student in our building show up with a mask on one day. I'd kind of like to know from teachers as they're going through their first week is nonchalantly indicate on their notepad and email it to the principal about how many kids in a class wear a mask coming up. And that's going to kind of give us I think, a vision of what the voluntary compliance is and what we have to act on that.
How many choose to wear masks?
Yeah, I mean, not many, how many, day one when we're in, hopefully, green, things don't change. How many people wear masks? And I suspect we're gonna see, my guess is we're gonna see a high volume of staff that voluntarily wear masks.
I think
That's my
staff
guess.
you will see. I don't know that you will see it with students.
And I'd like to see what that student number becomes too.
We have 4 more that just filled it in, and we're not live, so.
Do you need a vote on this tonight, or?
We open next week, so we gotta come up with
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And we have a meeting.
Yeah. I
So
need
does
to
the
let-
board, I guess, the former board, does the board feel that 40, that would force us in the red, is too high or too low?
That's 40 in
40
town.
community, yes.
But then,
I mean, our highest was 57, and we probably didn't have more than 2 weeks.
is there a dual look? If we have 40,
Yes.
if we have 40 in
Yes.
the community and 0 in our buildings, where are we on the chart?
And that's, and because it does say here, 2 indicators suggest different levels, actions corresponding to the higher level will be taken. And we say the actions corresponding to the school level will be taken. I mean, we could certainly shift our metric there.
I think you could have a very low number in the community, and all of a sudden we see high numbers in our school. And I think you can see the reverse on that as well. So I think
So you're suggesting having the
Priority.
school priority be on the school and the variable being on the community. So if, say, you use the number of, let's say, 6, if it gets to that or exceeds it, then that school would go into the red for precautions. And if the community was over 40, it would come up for consideration to go into the red.
With a back check to the school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we also went from 1 to 12 in a 3-day period.
Yes, you did.
So that's,
Well, it was less than 4 to 12, but yes.
right, but if you look at the totals, it went from 466 to 467, which
Right.
says to me there's 1.
It's 1,
Out of
yeah.
the 1 to 4. And then we went to a confirmed 12 in 3 days. So whatever we put in place has to be fluid enough to be able to react, boom, and do it. 36 hours make all the difference.
The other thing too, on some of those numbers is, right now, DHHS is not updating numbers on weekends.
No.
Is that going to
That's
change?
a 3-day window,
Yeah, is that going to change once we hit open school? Do we know?
They've not indicated that in any of our calls. I don't know.
Dr. Chan's on vacation.
I think that may be in large part dependent upon how many calls they're getting from us over the weekends. I spent a good number of my weekends spending quality time with the HHS. So, because I would get a call from a parent who says, so-and-so is positive, and I would have to start the tracing and I would make a call. So, I think if they start seeing a whole lot more activity on the weekends, we will see a different level of communication.
So, Lieutenant, do you feel that 6 is too high for a school building? Too low? It needs to be the
Yeah.
threshold between red and yellow.
And I think the difference there is if I see 6 in a classroom, or I see 6 across a building, that makes a difference as well. And I know that's a point that Tim had brought up. I think 6, between 5 and 6 to say, yeah, you're gonna mask up. I don't have a problem with that. I wouldn't say that's where we shut things down, that's not where we go remote, but it's where, okay, folks, you know.
I mean, to go from red precautions to remote, it's going to take some conversations and some things we can't put in place.
And permissions. We can't do that on the fly anymore. We have to get DOE's permission to go into that role, correct?
I can do it for 2 days,
Yeah, okay.
which gives me time then to
Yep.
secure
2
permission
days,
if I
we
need
could
to.
just shut down.
We could,
Right.
because making things up in June is fun.
Right, but our ability to go from in-person to full remote is going to take how much time?
Every kid will have a device deployed in the first week of school,
So
so
say we can do it
I could do it
the next
overnight.
day.
I mean, I could say, no more snow days, there'll be remote days. But, you know what? At least one
I don't
snow
think
day
we're
for the
gonna solve
year.
it all,
You
but-
gotta have at least a good snow day.
So, we get into the red, we've got cases in our building, we have students that are quarantined, we've got a 10-day incubation period. So at our next meeting following that, once we get into a red situation, or change the color code, we have a review so that if those numbers go back to 0, do we have a temporary reprieve that the masks can come off or stay on depending on what their choice is? Or do we stay in a masked mandate once we hit that red number and we're forever there?
No, we have to have the ability to come out based upon
So-
the 2 parameters, which is community infection and school infection.
So once those change, and once we get beyond that 10-day incubation period, then we have, or you would have another review of one of the two.
Well, and I think too, I guess the question I would have is because if I get to 6, odds are I'm not going to be notified of 6 in one fell swoop. It's going to be 1 was Tuesday, 2 were Wednesday, 3, another one Friday, And so it's going to be a rolling 10 days,
Right.
potentially.
So
So at the point that it's no longer 6, the masks come off, even though I still have these 6, the first ones who are,
I think there's probably gonna be like a minimum time. So if we have a minimum time of, say, 1 week, so if we're gonna say we get into the red zone on a Tuesday.
masks
It's a minimum-
through next
It's a
week.
minimum week, and where does that put us in those quarantine periods and the infectious time of those people that we're looking,
Yeah, if we do 1 week,
is that the
quarantine.
number?
The isolation is 10 days. If
Well, 1 week is really 7 days.
It's 7 days. And a lot of times, by the time someone gets the results back, because, you know, if it's a PCR test, they may not have it for a day or so, and they may have had symptoms on Tuesday and not gone until Thursday to get a test. So now they're in quarantine, but it's only 7 days because they go back to date of first symptoms. So, yes.
Right. So. yeah,
I think
that
probably a week makes sense, Charlie.
To start off with, I think that we can make adjustment. So, and if you look at the infections per building, where do you put the green to yellow? Does it make sense to be 3 or should it be 4? We say 6 per school, if we go 3, does that make sense or should it be 4? Because 3 over one whole building, does that really force us into the yellow, or should it force us into the yellow? I mean, right here, it's just a number, so if you.
This is where the difference between Valley View and the middle school comes in, because Valley View may be, you know, for the most part, they're in their rooms. I mean, they may go to specials or what have you, but they're not in 9 or 10 rooms over the course of the day. High school, upper middle school, those kids are changing 4 to 5, 6 classes a day, cafeteria, locker rooms, what have you. So they're all over and mixed through. I think 3 middle and high school has the potential to go a whole lot faster than 3 at Valley View.
You can say that, but the time of exposure is totally different also. So if you have the students in the same classroom all day, they're potentially
got 3 in
exposed
that-
all day,
well,
instead
yes.
of 1 period.
If you have 1 here, 1 here, and 1 there, maybe not as big of an issue as if you have 3 in that classroom, that would certainly do it.
I mean, do we have any evidence based upon what we saw that agrees with your initial statement that when we had cases in high school, they transmitted more easily or a higher degree than at Valley View? Do we have any data that would indicate that, or we just?
I have numbers of, clusters that happened with a given group of kids that at the high school, because their exposures to one another tended to be different than just a set classroom session.
Right, but sports related,
Mostly sports related, yes.
so.
So the green, masks are voluntary. The yellow, we're recommending them, and the red, the masks become mandatory. So on a green and a yellow, does it make sense to go from, once our cases in a building hit 2, we're going to recommend masks, brings us into the yellow.
They're still not required, they're recommended.
They're recommended,
Yeah.
so they're still not required, so we really don't have to bounce around those numbers as hard. But once we hit that concrete number that you just brought up on the red, then we're there in the mandatory. Does that keep it simple?
I mean, it brings up a point that, so you could go 2 or 3, because it is voluntary, and it would highlight students and staff that, hey, we have had a couple of positive cases, and everyone should be as cautious as possible. I mean, some students may take that through masking, some may do more concentrated hand washing, some may do it more with social distancing, based upon their own approach. Right, yeah, so I'm okay if that, you know, we may have that to 2 or 3 per building. But, I mean, if you go 3, then it's 3 and 6. And then 20, 40, 20, 40.
Want to go 2, 4, 6?
Well, because
That would
if
make-
it's,
that
if
would
it's
make
0 to
sense.
2, that would make it 3 for yellow. So that's the same thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, so 20 cases, below 20 cases would be minimal for the community, and below 3 cases would be minimal. And the moderate threshold would be 6 and 40. After those numbers. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? This is just to change that section. Hearing any, all in favor? I mean, and I think as we roll out with this, that can change based upon scenarios that may not have been thought of. So if it, you know, we can take it back up and we see that it's not accomplishing what we want, either by being too restrictive or not restrictive enough. And I think that will, those clear numbers, with both of those caveats, hopefully the parents will feel more comfortable, because we just looked at the community number and it said 40. But what happens if there's 10 in the school? You know, which could happen. And that there's a threshold that's prevailing for that.
And so red is going to be mask requirements. Are we adding other requirements to red as well?
I think the minimum needs to be mask barriers. That's a question. And I think the minimum needs to be social distancing in classes that we can permit it.
Yeah, that's going to be tough in a lot of
Right.
areas.
And the answer may be, can't do it in, say, 30 or 40% of the classrooms.
I would say it's probably higher than 40.
So that may be the initial, where if we go to red, it may be social distancing where possible, mask mandate, and then depending on that time period, maybe the staff and the board can implement back in some additional things to address it after discussions. I mean, really, the barriers, which takes time to get in place, and moving all the furniture and rearranging the classrooms, and using some of the other spaces for classrooms.
For classrooms or for, we've had multi-purpose rooms being used for cafeteria, eating in the classrooms, that sort of thing.
We also have a higher population this year because we're not running the remote program.
Correct.
20-30% of our students back in the building.
Right.
So I don't think
That-
social distancing is going to be as feasible as it was during phase 1. But the other thing that we didn't mention, and I just want to make sure that it's in place, is on day 1 when school is opening, that we have the hand sanitizer outside the classroom doors, and that students are encouraged to use them as they go in the room.
They're right there.
And the cleaning protocols.
So now, where in this policy was that stated, or we need to add that? Say these are the minimum protocols that will be put in place when we go into the red. Others may be added, I think, per the direction of the board, or
And we still have the cleaning, we still have the hand sanitizers, that's all up anyway.
Right.
We're not taking that down. It's still there and available. Now, if we're at no restrictions, we're in the green, we may not be hounding kids as much, do your hands, do your hands, do your hands.
Friendly reminders.
Friendly reminders. Once it becomes red, it becomes a little more militant, or a lot more militant, as the case may be.
as long as you don't start acting like Australia.
No snakes in the grocery store.
I was talking about rounding up kids with vaccinations.
I know.
Because we know how well that went. Any other discussion on this?
I do, Mr. King.
Go ahead.
I think it's important to clarify in reference to our public input phone call earlier, that the reason I made the suggestion that parents speak directly to the superintendent wasn't because I don't think there's necessarily going to be a different set of rules for students with IEPs. There's just confidential information about learning styles and things like that we can't get into in public input situation. But I don't want the message to be sent that all it takes is a phone call and we're going to alter our opening plan. I
Right.
think that's important to
Yep.
state, because I don't want folks watching from home to think that that's the case.
And I will say, she had contacted principal, had already received an email outlining the options that we have. That email was copied to me.
Right.
So-
And all the mask wearing, this is all optional. If somebody feels that that's going to improve, benefit and make their child safer in school, these are all things that they can do on their own.
Of course.
And one thing that we talked a little bit about is potential exceptions for people who are.
Right now, if we have medically fragile students, right now, I don't have an alternative setting
Right.
in general.
So that would have to be through VLAC or?
Right now, the principal option, if they're looking for just online, would be through VLAX. For us to do an alternative setting, we do have some limited options available that are short-term temporary solutions. But, for instance, for me to say that someone is going to be tutored for the school year, that's something that we would have to go deeper into.
But we may have a program in January based on the state plan.
There is a possibility, because remember the solution that fell through, we are still
Right.
pursuing to see if we can do that. But it is going to look more like, well, not necessarily like VLAX. There will be some changes.
Does a medically fragile student qualify for a 504 plan?
Potentially, yes. Depending, we would have to make a review.
Right. Which would allow for some accommodations.
Yes, it would. Yes.
Thank you.
But what do we have for accommodations as of right now?
On an individual basis, there are things that if I start listing, then we start having people cherry picking things that they're going to bring to the
Right.
table. We will discuss on an individual basis what's available.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Has there been any guidance at the state level about that? Because my understanding from friends and colleagues that are from other states is that some states, and I would argue that this is legally challengeable, have kind of shut that down.
We have been instructed to make sure that accommodations are given for those who need them, period.
Okay.
We've not been given, you can do this, you can't do that. That becomes a local decision based on the need that's presented to
Okay,
us.
thank you.
So we have latitude.
Yep.
So is there anything else we need, people want to discuss and consider this? Just draft SAU COVID-19 mitigation response plan.
I'll let it go. I was just going to make a reference to I'm having a hard time if I'm a student and I got severe peanut allergy. Those peanuts can cost my life. We're not taking those type of medically challenged students and putting them into a remote or accessory offsite environment. So when we make this analysis, and I get it, and I want to make accommodations, but we have to be carefully balanced in, what do we do with the student with HIV? What do we do with the student who, may only have one kidney and is subject to massive infections? We're not removing all these other people. So by looking at COVID in a different direction and saying, yeah, you can go remote, we're actually discriminating against some of these other people that we've never accommodated.
I know.
So I mean,
which is why we can't just.
We've got to look at that in a very, very narrow focus on what we're going to provide and how we're going to define that disability that makes them eligible for those services.
Particularly in light of the way that the state is now defining divisive concepts and not being able to give one group or one individual more than another unless there is they can't be made to feel more than or less than. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a very close tightrope of how that plays out. I think what we put in place ahead of that really deals with the principal piece of the instructional part of that. But some of the guidance that we're getting now from legal firms that have run workshops on this expand this out in a whole lot of other areas. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
They're expanding out what they believe and how it's going to act without any precedence.
They're seeing where some of the
concerns,
the threatened litigation may be coming
where
from.
it may lead to, and getting paid to give you what if all the bad scenarios.
Yes, and not saying that I'm going down the rabbit hole, but on the other hand, it also helps to know where the landmines are hidden. So
and it just seems that obvious to me that everybody, I think everybody is concerned, but the degrees of where people are very fearful even going out in public is I think there's quite a few people that are really concerned and even if you look at the statistics of some of the classes, even with the Delta variant and all the information, we try to stay up on it. Yes, it is in some ways worse, but there's some things that we can't control. Right. Can't put everybody in a bubble.
No. And I don't know that we would want to, actually.
Concerned about some of the social side effects of people getting that worked up about it and fearful to even come to school. Any other thing that we want to tackle on this, or do we want to make a motion to approve as amended?
Second.
I guess that would be most likely. Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, moving on, portrait of a director. So I did hand out, just for people to look at, just some my thoughts regarding the vision graduate title, adding some content, not so much in the first section because I just put some things in there we discussed, but just so people could have some different thoughts from a different board member. And my thought, thinking about it today, does this make sense that we take what we have for content and give it to the policy committee to work with staff and curriculum director to finalize a draft instead of basically trying to hash this out in the meeting. I think it does need to tie together. Like in my little draft here, I tried to tie together some of the topics that were listed in I guess, a culmination of some previous stuff that the staff had done, and mixing with some things that Tim had put out there. Not saying that mine was better than anybody else, that wasn't my intent. It was just my own working through what my thoughts would turn into words. So, throwing it up for discussion.
Kind of throw a monkey wrench into that, but on the same concept.
Not you. Go ahead.
I think first of all, as a board, can we say at the very top of this paper that that is the board's vision of the graduate? If so, can we adopt that language that starts with the graduating student and ends in pursue their goals directly from high school? Can we adopt that as our vision of the graduate? That's step one.
I'll read what I wrote, just so people at home can hear it. I just made some changes to the previous draft. It says a graduating student is a student who has gained the knowledge and skill set to become a productive member of society. Their mastering of the curriculum, along with becoming an effective communicator, lifelong learner, critical thinker, and an active member of their own community. This has prepared the students for the lifelong goals, whether their goals to continue their education, enter our military forces, or pursue their goals directly from high school. That's what I wrote as a kind of a revision, trying to incorporate some of the, I guess, topics or goals set from some of the previous community outreach and culmination of that. That's what I came up with. I mean, that's just my own words, but it just seems difficult for a board to come up with mission statements. At least for me.
I'm okay with that statement, and I guess my question is everybody on the board okay with that statement that was just read out loud, or would they make any edits or changes to that statement?
And can I clarify, this is the vision of the graduate, this isn't the mission statement, this is the vision of the graduate. Okay.
From my work?
No,
I know that it's very
I know.
surprising.
You missed an Oxford comma, but I'll let that one slide too.
Their mastering of the curriculum, along with becoming an effective community lifelong learner and an active member of their own community.
Does what?
Exactly. I'm missing a
Verb.
directive.
Yep.
Okay.
You're saying their mastering of this
So,
does what? Right?
but I think what you want to say, you're trying to come up with a way to put those categories into this statement.
Is our vision, and it is our vision at the end of that.
Right, I mean, it's just, the period needs
Right.
verbiage.
Or are you saying after community input is our vision?
Yeah,
This has prepared our students for their lifelong goals and achievements. I guess with the, I'm not gonna enter back and forth on grammar with the grammatical corrections. Is that our goal and what we want to see a graduate look like on the university system? In my opinion, is yes. We get 5.
I mean,
We get amendments or.
what would work?
I chose mastering of the curriculum or our curriculum, that's what I came up with, maybe a better way to say that. But the other points were basically a culmination of information that came through the strategic design and discussion. And I certainly don't disagree with those goals. I mean, be able to communicate, be a lifelong learner, be a critical thinker, an active community member, and how those gets filled in below. So that's what we'll be looking for in a graduate. I'll open it up for discussion.
So once we settle on what our vision of a graduate is, our strategic design should be a single page strategic design that lists our 5 categories that start with our mission statement and end with our vision. That's what our published strategic design should look like. Then what I would recommend, instead of sending this to the policy committee, let's send it to the accreditation committee so that they can create an internal document within the accreditation committee that is necessary to meet the accreditation standards.
Can
Go ahead.
I ask a clarifying question to make sure that so when you say our strategic design, so vision of the graduate is a one-pager that, or, you know, it can be in bullets or it can be in logos or.
Vision of a graduate is
It's just this paragraph?
just that paragraph.
Okay, so it
That's
does
what
not
the-
include these?
Does not include the bullets.
Okay,
Where your milestones become, the way I read, way back from the internal audit that was done by the accreditation committee right down to our final audit, is a standard that says within our curriculum that these critical aspects of our vision of graduate have to be readily visible throughout that curriculum. So why as a board should we try to wrestle with the accreditation standard? We give accreditation a vision. They look at, out of that vision, what are the milestones and where is it in the curriculum?
okay, all right. So, okay,
Does that make sense?
it does, it does.
What's your
I don't know that I would put it as that's the strategic design.
What is your input on that statement? I mean, I get that it's a board decision, but I
Right.
also want to hear from the educational leader.
Besides fixing something.
That aside.
I mean, I will get over the fact that I really want to make those bullets parallel, and we got to work
Yeah,
on
that stuff
mastering the
aside.
curriculum. But
I'm just talking vision.
as a vision, I guess one of the things that I saw both in our accreditation process when I was on this side of the table and when I was on the other side as an evaluator in another district for NEASC, the thing that really seemed to drive this question around the vision of the graduate is that, is it something that's articulated? This does part of that, but what they kept pushing against was the idea that a graduated student is one who's mastered our curriculum. Which parts? All of it? Ain't gonna happen. So when you say has mastered the curriculum, to what effect? To the effect of the fact that we want them to be effective listeners or effective communicators, critical thinkers. That is the outcome of that mastery. That's the sticking point where it kind of kept going back to, yes, we need to show where our curriculum gives them the pathways to do all of those things. But we got pushback around,
So
they
should it
just
say
master this.
the mastering of the curriculum that allows them to be effective communicator, lifelong learner, and critical thinker? Because each student's curriculum is going to be different.
Of each individual.
Right, I was gonna say, an individual's curriculum,
Um,
And when you
mastering.
say their own community, you mean the community they,
I say
not,
they
not
should-
our, not necessarily this community.
No, because
Yeah.
the community they're active, some
Yeah. No.
people's community may be
I thought-
on a global level.
Yeah,
I see it as
Some
the
may
group
be
that they
in the
coordinate.
neighborhood,
Okay.
some may be in the town,
sure,
some may be in the state.
okay,
It's really where they choose
yeah.
to put
That's what I
their,
thought you meant, just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure.
put their activities in. It's just like, under, like some of the thoughts, an active community member, contributes to successes for their families and community through their own personal and professional pursuits, because everybody has different pursuits. It's not, hey, I'm going to volunteer on a nonprofit. Some people may choose to do that, but being a coach, or being a mentor, or a teacher, or being other things contribute, and everybody, that's why I didn't want to define like some of the other things were said, the world, or, because that may not be the area that they want to make an impact. Or be
That's
involved.
up to us to decide.
Right.
Can we go back to Littell and can we sniff this out, their mastering of the curriculum as an individual?
I think a graduating student has, colon, and then list the skills that they've obtained.
You take out mastering of the
I would
curriculum.
take out the mastering of the curriculum because not everybody's going to master the curriculum.
A graduating student is an effective communicator, is a lifelong learner.
Right, and I think last week our same sticking point was educational background, which we've now changed educational background to mastering of curriculum. So those two seem to be the sticking points, so if we just take it
And I
out.
know that Tim, you said has, so I just want to make sure that I'm catching what you said, because
I just want to take
think
out
I
the
did.
master the curriculum and define it in a different way so that that first line is graduating student has, colon, and then list.
Has become an effective communicator, lifelong learner.
Yeah, but I think,
Okay, has become, okay.
yeah, but I don't want to get into the milestones per se, because I think.
No,
No,
think-
no.
No,
I think
I
our
get that
vision,
part.
our vision is to come up with a vision of graduate.
No,
So,
My vision of, once we come up with that statement, once you define, and this is my opinion, and I'll say it here, because I'm going to say it again, just like I said other things again. Send it to the accreditation committee, because if you list things like, as an effective communicator, and in our accreditation compliance manual, not as part of this process, but in our accreditation compliance, if we don't map that to the curriculum, our
correct,
next visit, you're gonna fail.
right.
understood,
So,
yeah.
so let's give them the vision. The accreditation people are the experts that have gone through this from day one. Different industry, but I have sat on
Boards.
accreditation boards, and I understand how to interpret accreditation standards.
I mean, basically, they're saying, this is what you're saying your goal is.
And this
Show me where you're
This is
accomplishing.
where it is in the curriculum.
And do you have
And
the,
if we can do that, then we pass that standard. If we can't, we will fail.
have you created the conditions to make that vision accessible?
Yes.
So my question, Tim, is to make sure I've got it. You're combining the first and second sentences.
I'm just simply saying that this board should define the vision statement and take the milestones and forward that to the accreditation committee to define and map to a curriculum, to a portion of the curriculum.
So the graduating student has become an effective communicator, a lifelong learner, critical thinker, and an active member of their own communities.
Where are you,
She's basically starting off, striking the first sentence and modifying the second.
Because that's where I'm trying to make, because that's where I was, are you combining the first and second sentences together? Or where does the has come in, Tim? Because that's where I got lost. I started to write and then I listened and I lost it.
I mean, if you keep the first sentence, you have to tie the second sentence back.
Correct.
The graduating student has become an effective communicator, lifelong learner, critical thinker, an active member of their community, their own sphere.
I would say community, because that can be defined very broadly, like Charlie said.
So is that good? The graduating student has become, strike it, to an effective communicator.
But are we keeping the first sentence?
That was my question. Are we,
if you're starting off with the graduating student, you keep it part of it, strike the part. So-
well, true.
So the graduating student, you strike is a student, all the way to the word productive, prior to productive. So the graduating student has become a productive member of the society.
Well, you've got an active member of their own community, so we're going to,
So, but you could take the middle part and say, well, you're going to start off with a graduating student, or
Okay.
What are we starting off with?
The graduating
The
student.
graduating student,
Has become.
I would put in,
Is some letter.
has gained the knowledge and skill sets to be, or to become, an effective communicator, lifelong learner.
We want to say what the graduating student is when he hits graduation. So the graduating student is,
Right.
Well, you could do it, the graduating student, a student has gained the knowledge and skill set to become
Right.
an effective
Yes.
communicator, lifelong learner, critical thinker, and an active member of their own community.
Yep, that's what I
So
was, exactly what I was thinking. What she said.
so the graduating student is one who has gained knowledge and skill sets to become an effective communicator, blah, blah, blah.
Because that is, the goal is knowledge and skill sets. And I think that's important to have in there, because we are teaching input skill sets and they're gaining knowledge through the educational pursuit.
So then with that, last question, maybe. Do we need the last sentence?
This
This is
has prepared
prepared.
our students for the lifelong goals achievement. I don't see why we want to take it out.
You know, I think it's so,
I mean, you
It's
said it's
still
going to be a
work.
lifelong learner. I'm just asking. We can leave it, that's fine.
I like it in there because it shows that our planning is based not around strictly college, but what that student's vision is going to be, whether they enter the workforce or whether they enter military service. These are the critical skill sets that we want to see every student need to accomplish whatever choices they make in life.
Okay.
So I guess at the end of the first sentence, we had talked about having members of their own community is our vision. So that's still in there.
I think we took out
I don't think.
is our vision part.
Okay. I have to.
Well, you've got vision of the, we started there, but, because we needed to finish the sentence.
Should we read what we have now as our vision of the graduate back into the record? I'll make a motion.
The vision of the graduate is one who has gained the knowledge and skill sets to become an effective communicator, a lifelong learner, a critical thinker, and an active member of their own community. This has prepared students for their lifelong goals and achievements, whether their goal is to continue their education, enter our military forces, or pursue their goals directly from high school.
Make a motion to accept that as the Farmington School Board's vision of the graduate.
Second.
Discussion.
I guess if I could,
Go ahead.
did you want, so with your earlier suggestion of having this go to the accreditation committee, what if they come back with a tweak, no?
Becomes amended.
Right.
Okay, but you don't want that, do you want that as part of your motion, and it's gonna go before them, or no?
I was going to make that as a separate motion.
Oh, okay.
But I want to just get,
Yeah.
this is the board's vision of the graduate.
Okay. Go ahead.
One question. Kathleen, have you come across this before? Are we close in a global description, a vision of the graduate?
Mike?
Doesn't work.
Sorry.
I would like.
So-
Well, she's gotta get closer to the squirrel anyway.
Squirrel?
Squirrel.
Squirrel.
You're good.
You're fine, you're fine, you'll be fine.
Steve-o.
Turn this.
There you go. We
As long as
found
the
a job
squirrel
for
doesn't-
Steve.
Yeah.
As long as the squirrel doesn't turn on you, you're all set.
Starts moving.
So like I said, I'm just looking for.
I think in all the iterations of what you've looked at and presented as possibilities, your intentions are all in the right realm of what is being looked at for a vision of a graduate. The one piece I will say that NEASC will probably want you to go further with is including those things that are those mile markers.
But
because,
he
Which
wants
we
the
will.
community to do.
But not within the
But the
vision
input will come
statement.
from the accreditation committee, so that,
We're
I'm
not
acknowl-
ignoring those.
So I'm
Right.
acknowledging that that will be part of it, because we will need to build an assessment system to measure students' achievement. And that's where we will need those milestones as ways for looking to how students can demonstrate they're meeting that.
It's going to be the foundation for the objective evidence that we need to show to be accredited.
So if you were on a visiting NEASC group and you encountered what we just verbalized
In the vision state, in the vision.
in the vision of a graduate period, would you be comfortable with it?
They would probably want to see page 2 with the milestones and be comfortable with it.
That's okay.
And the reason why I'm mentioning that is only because from the samples that I have from NEASC, they do tend to have that information as part of their one-page document. So were we to have it on a second page following it, that I think would be satisfying.
I think what I'm hearing is that this group wanted to identify a particular passage. That's it. Then how we back that up can be C page 2. It's not that
Right.
we're ignoring it.
Or
but
see
we-
below, but this
Right.
is the part you're letting someone else argue about.
Exactly, at least prepare and bring back to us.
Right, so there is where the different iterations and ones that have been suggested are all speaking to the heart of what we would want for our graduates. Yes.
I just figured you'd play that game before.
So, any other discussion, discussion regarding what is going to be the vision of the graduate statement? I think it's a pretty good start, but I'm certainly would be open in the future if somebody had recommended change for good reason.
I think it needs to be a fluid document, at least for now. I mean, we need a starting point, we found that starting point, we've jumped off, but we need to leave just a little bit of space on the far end. That's me.
Any other discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, all in favor? Go ahead.
I'm going to make a second motion that we take the board's vision of a graduate, send it to the accreditation committee, ask them to help us define milestones to that vision, and then forward those milestones to the superintendent for curriculum documentation.
Second.
Okay, discussion. So,
Good.
hold on.
Yep, go ahead.
Get your question.
No.
So, if we're going to, sounded like we're going to draft something to send to the accreditation board, right?
You just
Yep.
For
did.
them to review.
It's gonna be this, you're sending them this.
Right. As far as the vision.
Right.
As far as the drafting of the milestones,
We're going to ask them for milestones that they feel fit the accreditation standard on our vision of graduate.
okay, what I was on the accreditation board, I would say, yeah, I'm not doing your homework.
Right.
Why don't you send me some, and I'll let you know if I like them. But they might do our homework for us. That's what I
We
would.
can send them this. We can send them
Well,
those,
this
we
is
can
just,
send them Tim's.
yeah, this is just some thoughts I had. I wouldn't say it at any level to
So-
be saying these are my stones.
So let me back that up a bit. Okay, when I read every report that's come out of the accreditation, the first statement is we don't have a vision statement. This is right, now we do. So with that vision statement, how do we make that meet the accreditation standard? That says we have to show what we're saying in this vision statement is present in our curriculum. And I think the right place to do that is with the people that are interpreting the standards. And we don't have a curriculum, so once we have these standards, then our curriculum needs to be built up according to
But,
these
but I
standards.
don't think they're going to participate without our participation of saying, okay, we would like some help with this to make sure that's, I don't know, I mean, go ahead, Ruth, tell me. I mean, I'd like to say, hey, please, can you do my homework?
I have two pieces that I'm going to speak to yours first. I think the concern would be that there was some work done on a previous one, not that the iteration came back the way that we were looking for necessarily, but that
Previous
work
from the board or from the,
from people who were on the accreditation
Strategic
committee who
design.
also worked on the strategic design,
yeah,
brought forward something. Board did not fully participate in that, number of reasons, we're gonna let that one go, but.
Stop right there for a minute. Didn't participate in what? The meeting that wasn't public noticed?
The
And the
first one
crap,
was,
the crap that was put out by the previous employee that worked here? Is that what you're referencing on why this board didn't participate? I didn't participate because the curriculum director couldn't legally host a meeting that this board was going to sit on. And by day two, it was a waste of my time. And the way it was set up, we couldn't even engage in communication with the public. So don't sit here and say this board didn't participate in a group meeting that failed us from being able to participate in. Thank you.
so, getting back to,
the concern
yeah,
that may be expressed is that without the board at the table, or at least representation from the board at the table, that what might come forward might not be perceived as what you're looking for. I can see that having some, it doesn't mean that it's a full board discussion, but having someone
so
from the
you're saying that
board.
if we submit it to NEASC and it come back with what?
NEASC isn't gonna do this for us. What I understood accreditation committee is that the folks internally who are
Right,
doing
yes,
this.
exactly.
So,
Our own committee.
Our
That
committee,
I don't believe it's met since, when?
I'm sorry,
That hasn't met since when? When was the last time accreditation committee met?
back in June. I believe there may have been some emails back and forth over the summer. The majority of those people were teaching summer school.
Okay. I thought my daughter was on that committee. I'll ask her when the last time she had communication.
There's more than one section of the committee. The students haven't been involved over the summer.
The reason I seconded the motion is even though it wasn't expressly worded in it, but it was certainly discussed in previous discussion prior to the first vote, was that my understanding is we are open to potential recommendations on tweaks of the vision. I mean, that's what I got from our discussion. You didn't necessarily say in this motion, we're talking about milestones, but that we were open to listening to potential revisions if they felt they needed to when they were working on milestones. And I don't necessarily agree that they're doing someone else's homework. I mean,
Well, I
they are-
have to, I guess I have to back up on that because I was somehow, when Tim made the motion.
You were thinking NEASC.
I was thinking NEASC.
Oh, okay.
NEASC is not gonna do it.
The organization is
You're right.
but we
Not
have
the,
these
not
out.
the.
But, and for anybody that you think potentially could feel that way, this is the opportunity.
Right.
This is the opportunity that we're asking them to continue to participate in.
Right. I
We're
mean,
looking for help.
we, from the board, you can take some of the discussion and bullet points or ideas back to that committee and say, these are some thoughts. Take what makes sense, change what needs to be changed. But we need to show objective evidence of accomplishing these things that are stated in our vision statement.
In accordance with the standards that NEASC is presenting, right? So it's, how do we become in compliance with this standard is what we're asking for accreditation. But if there's a communication range, then we can schedule a workshop and we can do the initial discussion with the board on what we're looking for on the workshop. Are you interested in doing it? Go ahead and run. But at this point, it gives us the ability to move forward where we don't have a vision statement. That's been roadblock number one, which now we do have a vision statement, and the accreditation committee can continue their work. Now, I talked to one of the members on the accreditation committee way back when we were elected, and I said, is board representation something that should take place? And he said, honestly, no. I think we get some blatant, honest discussions in some of our meetings, and I think some people may be afraid to speak up with board representation at that meeting. So I just think that we've filled our mission in that we've provided them with a vision, and now we ask them to do what they do in the accreditation process and document compliance.
Discussion on motion.
What is the time frame when he has to come back?
Next
November.
November, so
Of
not
this-
this, not
okay,
this,
okay.
the following year.
So we're a year and 3 months,
Yes,
15 months and counting.
yes.
Who's counting?
Question I have on the motion, just to make sure that I'm clear. Tim said for curriculum documentation. I want to make sure that what the motion is that we're showing where it's tied to our curriculum and how we would, where the evaluation pieces are. I just want to make sure I understand documentation.
My understanding is that curriculum basically doesn't exist. Is that not what Nina said?
NEASC said we did not have an articulated curriculum in the same format all the way through. It doesn't mean that we don't have anything we're teaching from, but yes. Okay.
So my vision is that accreditation committee helps us define our milestones that will show how we meet our vision statement. Once they define those milestones, then that process moves to you and your staff
Integrating into curriculum.
to integrating it into a full curriculum that
Right.
also meets accreditation standards.
I mean, you can use the word milestones, you can use objective evidence, you could say metrics, I mean, whatever typically is the correct, term, but it's all the same.
And the accreditation committee may come up with something that we missed in our vision that's, they may come back to us and say, you know what, this would be really good to add in as part of your vision statement tied to this milestone.
Like a major part that's currently in our curriculum that's not cited in our mission statement.
The other part is as they're defining milestones, then they say, these are important milestones, but they don't appear in the mission. They're not referenced, they're not part and parcel. So we're gonna pick it back and say, can you add these two words? So that when we create our milestones, which then becomes curriculum, it flows back to the vision.
Any other discussion? Okay, I guess the motion. I think I'm clear. Not hearing any discussion,
No, one other old business.
all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
I had,
Was that 5?
yes, Tim, yes. I had one, two,
YMCA information out to the public.
YMCA has sent first links. I will go back and double check. I know that those were in the process of being put up when a phone call went out, and I received those late on Thursday.
Because we're just getting so close
I understand
to first day. And I know we're gonna get hit with it when we do open houses. That,
that. And they will be at the open house as well.
thank you.
We, yeah, I get you, but on that thought, can we make sure that some type of flyer goes out over our media, K through 8, and also indicate that they're going to be an open house, if somebody wasn't planning on attending, that might be motivation for them to attend. So I've got questions. First one is, high school physics class, what's the status?
Right now, we are in the process of seeing about getting an SOE for our new hire.
So it's currently available,
We're working on getting him so that he can do that class so that it's not a VLAX.
So why are students being told to register for VLAX for physics?
I will talk to you guys.
And third, if that's going to happen, I would hope that would happen in the conversation.
What is?
What are the contract services out there we're readily have the ability to provide in district? The conversation has to talk to the union because that's an unfair labor practice.
Well,
We don't necessarily,
we don't have it until
Really, yeah.
the statement of eligibility is required, we don't have it. But it was my understanding when we hired that individual, you indicated that
He's in
that
that
person was very interested in
He's
that.
very
And it
interested.
should not take very long to get a statement of eligibility.
so then we should be listing
should
that
be
class as available through.
and I will talk to them.
I guess my question is, for you to ask, is what caused this not to flow down correctly? Because based upon what we talked about,
I will have that conversation.
this is what we're going to offer, so why wouldn't that have, what prevented that from flowing down so that people were getting the correct information, students and parents?
I will.
So, something for you to look at. You have one more?
Actually, that's really one. Can you give me a ballpark with reopening? I know everybody's going to be quite busy, but it's not the learning loss committee back up. We're going to do some research among your staff and set a meeting. We're going to still keep it on Friday, but can you take your first 2 to 3 weeks off at school to get by the reopening, but on the 4th week or 3rd week, whatever looks like that slow period that come after the storm, get back to the learning loss community. And my last one, my last comment was, I kind of want to focus it for maybe the next board meeting conversation. Did a lot of thinking with when Charlie came up with a plan on our high school level kids. And he digested it, put some deep thought into it, talked to some kids, and it made sense. For this school year, would it be feasible, and can we get some feedback as a board, say for every class in our high school, meaning freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior, each one of those 4 classes, that successfully attain a grade of C or better, for the whole class.
So average?
No, the whole class has to maintain a C or better. Each quarter will receive $500 towards their school fund. So what we're doing is encouraging students to work with students to build each other up to get to that C level, no Ds, no Fs. If they don't attain that C level or better, they don't get the $500. But we've got classes that have been in a situation where their fundraising has been significantly impacted, which will be a motivating factor for them to raise some decent money. And it creates the bond and the challenge to come up and work towards that C or better.
It's an interesting thought. I think somebody might want to have a comment.
It might not motivate everybody, and it could discourage kids from taking really hard classes just to do something hard. Just putting it out there.
I had a conversation with a student today who was kind of, well, I don't know, I really want to take this harder class. Yeah, I can do it, but I don't want to work.
I mean, even if with that, I think Tim's idea is good. How do we incentivize the entire group, or most of the group, and how do we reward those for being successful? And if we were going to accomplish that what would be an acceptable threshold? It's not 100%. What is it? And what type of considerations should we contemplate in the award of that?
Or do you put 500 as the threshold and you come down depending upon what metric they meet?
I guess, just another question, going back to the comment is, why do we have these classes?
No, I'm not saying easy classes, I'm saying more challenging. Like, I can say, you know I could definitely get a B in that class. Maybe not an A, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But what if I'm like really want to take a harder class, but then if I could potentially get a D in it, we're discouraging them from taking that harder class that could be more challenging for them. They might get a D one semester and then do better and get a C or a D the next semester. But if you're saying, I would prefer my own child to work really hard, and if they get a D, they get a D, but they worked their butt off to do it. But if you're putting something a C or better,
I agree with your mentality, but the purpose in $500 is to say I'm a really bad algebra student, and your child thrives in algebra. To create that spirit week motivation where the stronger student now comes over and helps the weaker student thrive.
potentially,
And
yeah.
if it works, you succeeded. And if it doesn't work, you come up with plan B.
And I can say that not every kid's excited about the winter carnival either,
I
because
agree.
mine wasn't.
And-
Should have cared less.
I think the kids that you're trying to motivate aren't always gonna be motivated by the money that money's spent on prom, those are the same kids that aren't going to prom. Just because that's not their cup of
What
tea.
they're- yeah, what they're
Which is,
I like your idea, it's not, I'm just putting it at, like, here's the
Right.
opposite side to think about this.
or if you wanted to do like I don't know, your vision, I think, is more of an all or nothing,
Mhm.
500 or nothing.
Yeah.
But you could also use that same model and tweak it to be $500 for all A's, $400 for B's. You know, go down the rung. Who wants to be the class that gets $100?
I appreciate what Mr. Brown's trying to accomplish there, but I think the first time they realize one student ruins it for everybody, you're gonna lose them completely. In that one student that ruins it for everybody, maybe that student that we see one day a week bothers to get out of bed and come in. So, once one has said, no, I don't care, I'm gonna get my GED or whatever, I'm not even coming back next year, every other student says, it doesn't matter what I do, or I did all of that work for nothing. Now, we all know they didn't do the work for nothing, but now they feel that they have, and they're demoralized that next quarter. So, I like where you're trying to go with it, but I think that's gonna have a unintended consequence.
Going back to the superintendent's question, we average it to account for those people that aren't going to the prom and aren't going to succeed and aren't going to play.
Okay, but the caveat is, if all students aren't interested in the same thing. So how do you, if you set up a metric or a goal to set money aside for something that student isn't interested in, that's not a goal for that student. That student might be looking at, geez, I'd like to do this. So how do we put incentives that hopefully work for all, if not most? Because that may, I don't know if somebody would put a number on what that percentage of people that would think that was a goal they would strive to. Is it more than 60%? I don't know.
So let's survey the high school body to
yeah.
say, if you had to create a contest that shows education improvement, what would it be?
I agree with you, Tim. I think that's the best way to do it, just behaviorally speaking. You
Yeah.
want to get the input of the people who are going to be grabbing on.
And
And-
do
Do they buy into it?
And that survey is probably best coming out from your student government as
Yeah.
opposed from the adults.
Right. Agreed.
And the goals are going to be different, and it's going to potentially be multiple.
Yes.
And I think that would be good.
It's going to give us insight of what's going to happen in that.
We're all motivated by different things. What you're motivated by and what I'm motivated by are going to be two potentially different things. We can't expect that one thing is going to motivate every kid in the student body.
But you may have 3 to 5 things that motivate
Correct.
95%.
Correct.
That was gonna be my other comment, is why does your incentive have to be a group incentive? Why can't it be an individualized
Right.
incentive? That, you pick from one of these 5.
In some cases, maybe.
Yeah.
You need
And that could be the direction we get back to the kids. The second concept along the same lines is, do we want to create an incentive program in the grades where we conduct state testing?
Oh, yeah.
So that if we say, there's no reason for them to take the test right now or take it seriously, so if we say, if our scores increase by 10% as our first year goal, what would be that driving force to get the kids to put that effort in to get there? Is it a Kennedy Lake field trip? Is it a
each body.
The lower grades, oftentimes the pizza party will do it.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
want to be careful
Yeah.
that I don't promise a field trip, because we don't know what it's going to look like, and I would hate to have that throw out from under. But I like the idea that you're looking at,
some type of concept,
Yeah.
and what would be the acceptable level for each one of those grades along our whole K through 12, whatever grades we test in.
Or maybe let the kids vote.
I think it's going to look different in each school.
Yeah, I
What's
agree.
your, and give them maybe a short list of incentives and let each grade level vote, what's your incentive?
And you could, again, give them 4 or 5 things, and you might have to say, okay, these kids all want this pizza party, or these kids all want an ice cream, or, whatever it is.
Or let them give us some incentives.
Well, that's what I'm saying, you can say, what, if this, if you.
Or other.
Or
yeah.
other, yeah.
So,
There's
yeah,
a-
it's like
A cruise, I like that. 'Cause the teachers-
4 or 5 prizes.
Gonna need
Pick one.
chaperones.
Right. And then if the school board increases the scores by these initiative programs, what do we get?
We get a cruise.
Cruise, absolutely.
Reelected.
Some of you are cruising all
We
right.
did that rowboat out on the jacket.
My kayak off my door.
Get a chance to see me flap my wings and fly. Get on a cruise.
Not everything motivates everyone the same way.
Correct.
All right, I'm done.
Sure.
You sure?
Yeah.
Go in there.
Okay, but I do agree, I think that we can somehow find some ways to incentivize all our kids, both for the grades and the testing. I think it would be fun.
So my question is this something you're directing me to do, or is this something you're asking me to pass on to student government?
Well, we're gonna wave our magic hand and poof, it's gonna appear. Find a way to do that.
Got it,
I
okay.
like student government, because, well, maybe not the first week that they're back, but as they get through their elections and pass offices and things, I'd throw it out there. Say, what do you think about it? How do you want to see it work? And what would your carrot at the end of the?
Yeah.
Grades 3 through, well, and actually for
I know
state
Catherine
testing is
years
3 through
ago.
8 and 11. So that leaves out 3 classes at the high school, if it's just tied to state testing.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What grade is being tested at the high school?
Grade 11.
So you deal with the grade 11 student officers.
Right, no, I know. But if we're looking at wanting to create incentives for all grade levels,
Yes.
we would need to look at something else for 9, 10, and 12.
I think we can, yeah, we can look at incentives. My big deep dive in here is we're providing a significant amount of funding to grades K through 8 through our enrichment program. We haven't defined what that enrichment program is going to look like in the high school, and that's going to look different. So if we have different incentives at K through 8 that are going to help with that enrichment, I'm all for that. My focus tonight on bringing this up was to look at how do we get the direction of the high school moving forward, because we really haven't done much at our level anyway. And how are we looked at statewide? We're looking at statewide testing. So let's work on getting those up. And at the same time, whatever other programs we gotta do, we can add to that. So it's not an all or nothing, but it's like, try this and see how it works. We can add it with this.
I mean, in some way, in some instances, I think that students have the impression that it doesn't. But it does.
So, and we can,
So
when we
being
figure.
successful at a test, being successful at a grade is very, through hard work, is one of the best life lessons we can teach. So if we want to incent them, because that's basically through hard work. So we can incentivize that so they feel that it does matter more, then we'll be more successful.
And depending upon what the kids come back with for ideas, I'm assuming we're looking at funding potentially through general fund, ESSER?
To be determined.
Okay.
Maybe we'll raise it to donations. Maybe we'll have a benefit.
It happens.
Maybe it'll be the federal government. Maybe it'll be this taxpayer.
Each one of us nominate their own benefactor.
It sounds like, just clarifying, are there two different incentive programs that you're talking about? I'm trying to.
I think there needs to be a multiple pronged approach to activate
Mhm.
students to become
Because-
more involved.
I agree, and I'm just saying that'd be two separate things, because state testing is, state testing is separate, although if they're doing really well in their classes, one would hope that their state testing
No,
would be better too.
Those were put forward as separate.
Okay, I'm just
Not
making
tied to
sure,
each
I was
other.
just trying to.
But staff or the students could come up with other areas that they feel could be incentivized and would make it better. And I would, as a member, I would be open to that. You know, we may have targeted, say it's based upon a class, English, mathematics. It says, okay, this is something that we need to see, and we really would like to see an improvement in. We can target that. We can target, say, if it's mathematics. Okay, let's target that. And how we do that? It could be a class. It could be testing. And it may need to be a multi-pronged approach, and that may change over time.
Could be attendance.
There you go. There's another one that's deeply needed. Any other thoughts? I have one.
Anxious to get to non-public, but just looking at the time, I mean.
Okay, the only one I had is, we had a new position, was it posted? We developed a job description
Yes,
for a project manager.
yes,
Has that been posted?
yes. It has been posted. I will give you more information.
Okay.
No problem.
I just didn't, I couldn't remember if it had, that's the only thing I had. Anything else in the whole business? Okay, we have a public participation section. If anyone wants to participate?
Already did.
Once. Not hearing any, our next meeting will be next week at 7 o'clock. We have a manifest to sign. And I wish everyone a good night, and I'll make a motion to go into non-public session under RSA 91A, 132, A, B, and C, nominations and resignations.
Second.
Any discussion? Not hearing any, all in favor?
Aye.